My name's Charlie Lyne. I'm a film critic and filmmaker. I had a film at the festival last year called Beyond Clueless, and I'll be your chair for getting a foot in the door, next steps with young filmmakers. I'm going to quickly introduce our panel and then we'll have a little chat with each of them to see who they are. First, on the far left, politically, is Pegah Faramand, who is the editor of Channel 4's Arts Shorts strand, Random Acts, and has just come out of working at Vice for a decade, doing everything.
Makes me seem old.
Started as a very young child. Tom Davis, who is a producer at C-Think, has produced various films, including Breaking the Monster, which is at this year's festival. The Monster? A Monster?
A Monster.
A Monster, sorry. And that's screening today at what time?
3:30.
So you can come straight out of this and into that. On my right is Jake Witzenfeld, who is the director of Oriented, another film playing at this year's festival, as well as co-founder of the creative agency Exhibition and runs the production company Conch as well, which made Oriented. Correct. And then finally, on the far right, our resident fascist, Allison Gardner, who is the director of programming at Glasgow Film Festival, and will be telling us a little bit about kind of young filmmakers and new films from the other side of things. So I'm just going to jump back to Pegah quickly, and if you could kind of tell us a little bit leading into the clips that we're going to show just about how you started out. And we'll talk in a little bit about your work with Random Acts, but if you could start just talking about making stuff yourself.
Okay. Hi everyone. I wish I could sort of say it came from years of training and learning multiple skills at university, but my story is not as inspiring, and it's like almost, I guess it's a series of sort of serendipitous events that happened just after I graduated from university. I did fine art at Nottingham Trent and sort of didn't really know what I was doing for the first couple of years, and then but I knew sort of the medium that I was working with most of the time was with film, and a lot of the artists that I was interested in, from like Christian Marclay and Bruce Nauman, I knew that sort of video and editing was something that was really sort of inspiring to me. So that was sort of the first moment that I knew there was something there, but I didn't really know how I could what it was going to sort of manifest into. And then one year we went on a trip to New York with my class, and I went into a shop called, it was the Vice store essentially, and it was a bit like American Apparel before American Apparel existed, and there was like loads of hot young people sitting around not really doing much, looking like they're in a Larry Clark film, and I was just like, what the fuck is this? And I picked up a copy of the magazine, and I remember sort of just reading it cover to cover on the plane on the way back and being like, I hadn't really seen anything like it. I was sort of reading Dazed and The Face and The ID for years, but that was sort of the first youth culture magazine that I'd come across that really sort of talked about the world and, really cared about stuff, but sort of talked about it in quite a sort of irreverent and in a way that really engaged me that hadn't sort of happened before, because I always felt quite alienated by the news, I guess. And so I guess sort of fast forward a year or so later, and I ended up blagging my way into an internship in the New York office, maybe sort of lying about skills that I didn't have. But I got there, and the sort of most important thing that I did while I was there was they were making a document for what was essentially going to be a pitch to win Vice TV, this thing called Vice TV, which no one really believed was going to be a thing at the time. And my job was to go through all the back issues and look at all their sort of interesting articles that they'd done and pick out ones that I thought might make a good documentary on film. So that was a really sort of interesting experience to look at various stories and be like, okay, this might make a good film. It might translate well into film. And then, sorry, am I going over my quota?
No. Well, I'm interested. So
had you? This is your life.
Obviously, you falsified.
So I'll fast forward it, but essentially, it was at a time when Vice wasn't doing any sort of video at the time, and my first experience producing something was a music video where someone asked me if I wanted to, they were like, look, all you need to do is you need to get a cameraman with his equipment, you need to get a location to do it in, this, that, and the other, and you need to get 20 hot girls who are willing to sort of make out with each other for this video. And by the way, you have no money to do it. And sort of, I didn't really know what I was doing, but that experience was my first sort of venture into producing, and I was like, wow, this was, it was so much fun, and I learned how to sort of make something out of nothing and to really kind of tap into my resources and pull in favours. And then fast forward again, Vice ended up becoming a production company, and I ended up sort of making videos for them and documentaries, and then did that for far too long, and then here I am now, talking way too much.
And it's probably worth saying that that first attempt at producing something was incredibly successful. Right?
Yeah, and I think it's just that sort
of... For reasons you may see when we play a clip of it.
And I think the video is quite crass, but it was more that it was like, wow, suddenly seeing something that I made happen on screen, and it was my sort of first realization that like that was something that I could totally see myself doing for a really long time. And so and I think my old boss at Vice recognized that that was something that I could possibly do, and so he said, don't leave, stay and do all our production stuff. So I did, and it was it was an amazing experience. And at the time, again, it's all serendipity and luck and good fortune. But it was sort of just thrown in the deep end, learning how to shoot, learning how to digitize, knowing what a release form was, and how to interview people from really boring bands to really interesting people, and yeah, I guess that was quite a valuable. It was just a really interesting time to be there. And
so Tom, you're a little bit further in probably than at least Jake, who's here with the first film. Can you tell us a little bit about C-Think, your company, and how you started that and what your first couple of projects were?
Sure. So I started out, I went away to school for a year, and then I went to some college that was not a film school, and then I came back to Chicago, which is where I'm from. And I knew I wanted to work in the film industry, and at the time I thought I wanted to be a director. I really didn't know anything about producing and really didn't know anything about the industry. And I worked on films for about 2 years and did internships. And I actually got to work on like 2 films from start to finish. One is like a director's assistant that was like a film that didn't turn out very well, but was like a $10 million movie. And I got to sort of be there from the beginning to the end. And then I went to film school, and I pretty quickly realized that I wasn't a director, and I, also became pretty quickly okay with like accepting that I wasn't a director, and I started to produce other students' films, and then I met one of my business partners through one of my teachers who was shooting his thesis film at Columbia, and then with 2 of his friends from high school, the 4 of us started working together. And we've been together for about 12 years. And we all do different things. Like I produce, another guy shoots, 2 direct, 1 writes, another one also edits. And so we started, we were all freelancing, and we wanted to make our own movies. And so we just pooled together our resources, and we found a documentary that we could make that was within striking distance of New York. And so we found this subject matter that was, 3 or 4 hours away. We could go down there every weekend or every other weekend and shoot it, and we can make a movie. And we didn't need anyone's permission because it was, pretty inexpensive, because between the 4 of us, we did everything. We shot, directed. I did sound. I produced and did sound. So we made that film, which is called Dark On, which you'll see a clip from that. And about 3/4 of the way through, we got some financing, and we were able to up the production value. It's kind of a strange movie. It's a hybrid, and it's about live action role playing. So it's about people that are living the American dream, but under the guise of a character. So like one character works at Starbucks, and he's never been on a date before, but under the guise of a character, he has the audacity to ask a girl out. And it's funny, it's interesting, and we shoot their in-game battles like it's a ghettoized version of Braveheart. So that was a really fun movie for us to make. And it got received well. It won the Audience Award at South by. And, started our careers. And then...
just to cut in quickly, do you... it's interesting that you started out with two kind of fairly traditional attempts at routes into the industry, both film school and kind of starting at the bottom of the ladder on a film. Obviously, there's a lot of debate as to whether those routes are still valid. Do you feel like you got something from them, or was it just when you went completely on your own that you got somewhere?
Well, the thing is that there really isn't any kind of independent film scene in Chicago. It's all like big movies. Like the one movie that I worked from like start to finish on for 5 months was Michael Mann's Ali, which was like a over $100 million movie. But I got to be there from pre-production through rep, which was as like an office PA, which I thought was really interesting at 19 or 20 years old. I actually think it's very valuable to do that. I think internships are also really good to do. We have an internship program, and we ask our interns to make something while they're there, and they can use our equipment and underneath our tutelage. But I think internships are a great way to learn something. I don't think that you should do internships at places that don't value interns. Like we had one of our interns we really liked. She had one internship where all she did was answer the phone, and didn't do anything. But I think if you're going to do an internship, you should try to do it in a small company where you get to interact with the people that own the company. And even better if you can do an internship at a successful company where maybe the people that are principals there are only like 7 or 8 years older than you. Because I feel like if there's too much of an age gap, they're never going to like fold you into what they do. Like one of our old interns, edits our commercial work. He didn't know how to edit. This is 6 years ago, maybe. He didn't know how to edit when he started the internship, and he's actually now a working editor. We hire him. So, but I think, yeah.
We're going to have a quick look at a clip from Darkon, and in fact also one from New World Order. Could you quickly just set that up?
So New World
as well?
Order was, even though I'm a producer, New World Order was sort of my conception and characters. Those were my characters that I farmed and contacted. And then I was the producer, and then it's the same two directors with Darkon. But New World Order, the idea is looking at conspiracy as it relates to pop culture. So each conspiracy theorist is tied to a conspiracy, and we look at the way that they interact with that conspiracy in media. So like 9/11, looking at, the planes crashing over and over again. There's Waco, there's this guy that thinks he knows who controls the world, and looking at the way this like group is, anyway, you'll see it.
So Jake, we've got similarly a clip from your first film, which is of course here and screening tonight.
Yes, yeah, 9 o'clock.
So maybe as you are probably the most emblematic person in terms of new filmmakers' foot in the door, your foot has most recently entered the door. Could you tell us a little bit about how you came to make Oriented and what Oriented is, but also how you feel about this idea of that now being your first film? Because we've been talking a lot about, just getting out there and making anything, but are you also aware of kind of the fact that this is your first bit of exposure to the world?
Very much. Terrified. I can tell you a bit about how I came to make Oriented and what Oriented is, and then how it feels to be releasing it. I wanted to make films or theatre for a while as a teenager, and when I got to university, everyone was suddenly kind of getting internships in various professions that they wanted to go into, and that terrified me because I didn't see an internship a bit like Tom said, that valued someone going into a production company necessarily at the time. So I just decided to kind of be an independent producer and find a book and pursue it, and that was that's a project that I'm still working on actually. And it just so happened in my 3rd year of university I went to Israel, met a producer who was willing to put money in, found a girl and returned to Israel after my studies to pursue that project, but it all fell apart. So there I was, kind of like chasing after this project, left the girl, left the job, and decided I needed to, build a portfolio for myself. So I started doing videography work, like kind of branding video work, and also doing that kind of like young artist thing, just thinking that like a movie was going to come to me for a bit, like, you know, just kind of sitting in coffee shops and chain smoking. And it didn't come to me, so I started looking for it, with the other project dead and the branding stuff not being very satisfying. And in looking around what was coming out of Tel Aviv, I found a scene of young Palestinians, Israeli citizens defining themselves as Palestinian, homosexual, who were exploring, expressing their various challenges with dealing with that very complex identity. And I had no idea how to make a movie. I hadn't gone to film school. I had a camera, and I just started shooting them. They gave me access to their lives, and we began this kind of collaborative conversation. And I mean, I thought I was making a 10-minute promo, and then I realised as I kind of thought about it and wrote about it and showed it to people, footage, kind of like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? People said to me, wow, you've got something here, something interesting here. And then just kind of by pure chance, my professor from university was out in Tel Aviv, and I told him about it, and he put me in touch with a best friend of his who went on to become my producing partner, and then through that relationship, the resources suddenly became much more available, and then I actually had to learn how to make films. So that's kind of how Oriented happened, and that's what Oriented is.
So yeah, I'm intrigued as to whether, well, first tell us whether your other project that you originally wanted to do is still in the works, but I'm intrigued as to how you feel that just kind of following what you can get made and doing it yourself in that way changes how you kind of start out a career, because it feels like in the past people did used to much more kind of plan out a career and sort of imagine where their career would take them, and obviously that's why people couldn't direct films until they were 45. And now that, as we all seem to be advocating, this kind of go out and do it yourself idea, do you think that's something you will now just keep doing in your career, keep going for whatever's working, or are you dead set on making that other project?
I think that there are different types of films, and I think there are films like Oriented and first time films for filmmakers, or even filmmakers that just love making lower budget, indie, get your hands dirty type films, and I definitely want to keep making those. I'd like to do more myself as a director, and I definitely want to produce films like that. Now that I suppose I have a foot in the door, to quote the name of this panel, I obviously want to use that leverage to try and make films like the one that I started when I was at university, which is bigger budget and requires talent that has a bigger name than myself, or that I will have for the next 20 years, assuming all goes well. So I think it's a combination. I think that there are different types of filmmaking that exist.
Yeah, in fact, Pegah, I'm interested as to whether you, as someone who's advocating people go out and do their own stuff if they can, do you think that is a complete prerequisite now? Like, if you're looking for people to go out and do random acts shorts for Channel 4, would you just not even consider someone who hasn't already made something on their own or already shown that sort of inclination to do so?
No, I think, I think it's, like you say, it's changed so much, and just the fact that, the digital revolution has completely democratized filmmaking, and it means that anyone can make a film. I don't think when I'm sort of commissioning and looking for work, I necessarily think about whether the fact that that filmmaker has done stuff before. Someone can send me a treatment and they've never done anything before, but the treatment's really strong, and they might have some sort of reel that shows a sort of flavour of something that they've done before, but they don't have to have been, making films for a certain amount of years or anything like that. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
And I think that, I think it's tricky because it is so much easier to do filmmaking now, and in a way it also makes it harder for, as a commissioner, because there's so much stuff out there. And I think also, from the other side as well, when you're making films, it also often makes it harder to get your voice heard as well, just because there's so many people out there doing stuff and making films and getting it seen by the public, and distribution is so much easier now with online. But I think that I think that's a good thing. I think that the sort of it's leveled out the playing fields a little bit, and that can be an advantage as well. But yeah, I mean, I could go on, but maybe you want to.
No, well, in fact, I'll use that moment to bring you in, Allison, because you must. The Glasgow Film Festival is now in its 12th year?
Yeah, going into its 12th edition.
And has grown massively in the last few, so presumably submissions have grown with that.
Yes and no. Just to start off briefly, on the far right, I actually owe all of my career to Mrs. Thatcher, so who put me out of work as a primary school teacher. So I come from a very different background than everybody else on the panel. Yeah, Glasgow Film Festival, we receive about 200 feature films, give or take 250 feature films. Unusually for film festivals, not Sheffield, but unusually for other film festivals, we choose 4 feature films this year out of those 4, which is quite a high percentage from straightforward submissions. For example, Cannes, I imagine, don't choose anything.
Sorry, just to clarify, you mean, so 4 came from open submission and then that was then added to a larger pool that you curated yourselves?
The other 170 features that we had curated, yeah. So that's quite high for feature film, and with our short film festival, nearly all the films in that come from submission. So.
Yeah, I think it's quite, because the issue of open submission is quite a kind of difficult one, I think, to understand when you are starting out as a filmmaker, because you have this quite kind of idealistic vision maybe of just sending your DVD off, paying your 25 quid, and then you have as much chance as the new Lars von Trier movie or whatever else. Yeah. That might sound like quite a low number out of a whole festival program, but that is, you're right, very high. How would you say the best, if there are filmmakers who do want to make a feature of some kind that they are doing it themselves with, what do you think is the best way to kind of beat those odds? Well,
don't apply to Cannes, because you're really just wasting your time. Get to know your local film festival. Nearly every city practically has a film festival nowadays, so get to know your local film festival and submit to them first and talk to them and engage with them and volunteer at their film festival and get to know it, and that way you know what sort of films they're looking for, and that's a great way to start. It's also a great way to get a job during the festival as well, so there's lots of different routes, but certainly send your film into your local film festival, speak to other people, show it to people, get people's feedback, constructive criticism. I try to be constructive with my criticism to those films that are submitted. We watch every single film that is submitted. That's not all film festivals do. We watch every single film.
Do you watch them in their entirety?
No, I'm going to say this is terrible, but as the mother of 2 teenage daughters, I watch them while I'm ironing, and so if I put the iron down and sit down and watch it, it's in the festival. So it's quite an unusual approach. But yeah, I give everything half an hour, because I think by then, if it hasn't engaged me in half an hour, then it's not really going to engage an audience. And obviously, I also programme the Glasgow Film Theatre, which is one of the busiest independent art house cinemas in the UK. So I watch a lot of films for that as well. So I have quite a broad base from which to work. I don't just programme the film festival, I also programme the Glasgow Film Theatre as well. So.
Have you seen Oriented or Breaking a Monster yet?
No, but now I'm going to. I definitely want these films. So.
Can I just quickly add to that as well? Because I guess that's really interesting from a sort of long form perspective of like how to submit stuff into film festivals. But there's also such a wealth of kind of online platforms that will commission docs as well that aren't long form, if that's what anyone else in here is possibly interested in doing. And that's what a lot of documentary makers start off doing as well, is doing 10-minute docs that might get part funding from a Dazed and Confused or a Nowness or whatever it is, and then they go on from doing that to longer form. So that's also, and just understanding like the kind of work that you're doing and and what different platforms out there commission. So if it's like more arts and technology, then you can go to The Space or the Creators Project or Fact or whatever it is, or if it's more fashion or if it's more music. So there's quite a lot of online platforms that are sort of almost easier to get into than big sort of film festivals, I think, as well.
Right.
Maybe not.
That's actually where we started with Breaking a Monster. It's it's unfortunate, but the Strand was discontinued. It used to be called the Avant-Garde Diaries, and it was sponsored by Mercedes. But the short film that we had made was,
I remember that.
you know, we had a little bit of a lull between features, and we tried to stay busy. And I think we did about 7 or 8 shorts. You know, the budgets are small; they're like $4,000 or $5,000, but it's you know, it was worthwhile for us. I mean, we made that short film, got a lot of traction. You know, helped the band blow up, and then we were able to land, you know, pretty good private financing for the documentary that's here.
How did you go into dealing with them? How did you approach them in the first place?
Well, we had been introduced to the agency that was commissioning the short series, and they had a bunch of ideas that they just kind of put out on paper. They hadn't really produced that idea. There were these kids, and they were kind of unsuspecting because they're African American kids. They're playing metal, and they're in Times Square, and people are talking about them. I mean, when we started shooting with them, sometimes they would make $1,500 a day in bucket money. So like there was like crowds of like dozens of people that were like surrounding them. So they were starting to get just sort of like traction, just word of mouth. And so we initially we were like, well, what's the story? You know, initially we turned it down. We said, you know, so what? You know, like it's just like, you know, did they have songs? Like, no, nothing's really recorded. But then we agreed to interview the kids over the phone, and we just found them really interesting and compelling. And then we agreed to do it, but not really knowing exactly how it was going to turn out.
And they knew you just from previous films that you'd made, or
yeah,
that was how you got involved?
It was, well, that's one of the things also I wanted to say, which I think is hugely helpful getting started out, is just like embracing the value of the introduction. So that relationship was an introduction, and a lot of the really good things that have, for me, come out of relationships is sort of like, is being paired with people, by other people you know, and the right people for the right reason. So that relationship was an introduction for someone we know.
And Pegah, I wonder if you could talk about, because obviously that is a brilliant thing to be able to meet people and network at environments like this, but if people are coming to you, for instance, with an idea from nowhere, what's the best way to present that to you in a way that is kind of conducive to you actually commissioning?
For Random Acts?
For Random Acts, or I suppose in your experience at Vice as well.
Okay, well, from my experience at Vice, it was, I mean, it's like how any other commissioner would work, or, you know, like Allison was just saying now, if it doesn't sort of grab you in the first, you know, few sentences, then it probably won't grab an audience either. So, overcomplicated, convoluted treatments are definitely not the way to go, like pages and pages and pages. You know, you should be able to explain what your idea is in a very simple, clear paragraph. And often, I mean, for me personally, I don't necessarily always need it to be kind of flowery language, and to, you know, it's just like an idea is an idea, and, you know, you can tell if something is interesting. And also, stories, you know, you might think that every story's been told 1,000,000 times, and that might be the case, but it's about how are you telling that story, like what angle are you coming from that makes it more unique and more interesting. So from a documentary point of view, and also it's sort of like, so, you know, talking about my experience, so I did Creators Project ran that for a few years, and so that was sort of Vice and Intel's platform, which sort of celebrated arts and technology, which I was mentioning before. So when people would kind of come to me with an idea, it would be like, here's the idea, and sort of here's why it works for Creators Project in a way. So sometimes it might not be obvious, like, you know, how the idea might be suitable to that platform, and almost you can sometimes tailor your idea. So if you've got a story to tell that might not be necessarily techie, but you can find a way to make it fit in, that's quite a clever thing to do. And often if something's strong enough, we'll want to take it, even if it's like not a very sort of clear cut angle into the sort of arts and technology strand, or whatever that is. And for Random Acts, I mean, Random Acts is, you know, pure sort of, it's the more sort of experimental art film strand of the channel, so it's actually not docs. It's like the bit that isn't documentary. However, you can play with the form of doc. You can sort of make something so abstract that it's actuality, but it's told in a different way. And it's the same principles. People send in a treatment that's like a one-pager description, what the idea is, if it's like heavy on like what the concept is, or it might be that it's a really simple idea, but it's more about the filmmaking technique, something interesting they're doing about how they're shooting it.
And do you find that you do tend to get new people being commissioned, or is there like a quota for new people? Because it must be tempting to just fall back on the people who are very solid, reliable.
It is a tricky one, especially coming from an environment where you sort of do have your core. Because actually, in a weird way, what I found at Vice is that people were sort of scared to come to us. People thought that it was like this impenetrable like company that no one wanted to hear from, but actually it was the opposite. Like we were really open to people coming to us for ideas.
I don't know if that's the case today still.
Have you had a bad experience at Vice?
No, just from my experience with Vice, I think that they've built their teams so much that the majority of their content is in-house these days.
But it's not actually true. Well, I mean, I haven't. I don't want to speak. I don't want to speak.
So maybe it's different in Vice UK.
I don't want to speak on behalf of Vice because, But I think the only, I think it was sort of a, chicken and egg situation, because the reason why they sort of ended up keeping a core team is because they weren't getting that many people coming in. But I don't think that. Well, I mean, again, you might have been dealing with another office and we don't
apart from poor old Jake.
So you want me to speak to some people?
No.
You want me to have a go at them and say, why did you...
Well, in fact, Jake, maybe I could ask you, just to bring it back to festivals for a second, as a sort of case study almost, could you tell us a little bit about like how Oriented ended up here at Sheffield Doc Fest having its world premiere, and what that experience of being a first-time filmmaker trying to make that happen is like?
Sure. We applied everywhere, and loads of places said no, and Sheffield said yes. It was great. It's a very simple answer.
And was that sending it in on open submission? Or?
It was sending it in on open submission. It was going to IDFA in October in Amsterdam and kind of schmoozing unofficially and meeting the right people and letting them know, that you've got a zillion films and my one's really good, you should watch it and consider it, and finding an angle, finding a way to raise the visibility. I think that I have a musician friend who says there are artists who make stuff and then just kind of sit back and wait for the world to come to them, and there are artists who make stuff and rush it towards the world, and I think that you have an obligation as a filmmaker to do the latter, otherwise if only it was so easy.
And I do think one of the things that can make a massive difference with very little effort, and in fact you might not thank me for saying this, Allison, but is as well as doing the open submission, like Allison's email address will be very easy to guess if you find any other Glasgow Film Festival email addresses. I'm sure Pegah's is as well, and I do think reaching out and just introducing yourself and saying, I've done, not trying to blag a fee waiver or whatever, but
well, I did ask my colleagues on Twitter what's the best. I'm just about to be on this panel. Anybody got any tips? And one of my former employees said, send a nice bottle of Côte d'Aron in with your submission, and it'll definitely get into Glasgow Film Festival.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying,
Well, I think because the submission forms often feel quite kind of cold and like it's just going into some machine, but of course there are real people like yourself sat back there watching all these films ironing.
We take a proactive approach with our local filmmakers, so we have what I would say a more open-heartedness approach to our local filmmakers at Glasgow, so that if you're a Scottish filmmaker or you've made a feature, and because it's quite difficult to get features made, so we will look at it much more kindly and we will actively seek those films out, so that when we're showing the films at the film festival, and it's a very broad international film festival, that we do have a selection from Scotland if they make the quality threshold, but we will look much more kindly upon our local filmmakers, and I think that's the duty of any film festival, I think, is to have a core of great programming, but also to help that next generation get a foot in the door. So we actively work with our filmmakers, and we might put them in a slot that they think is better, or a different venue, and help them work with them in order to get their film seen.
Tom, maybe you could talk a little bit about the next stage, because I know, so Dark On was at South by Southwest?
In 2006.
2006, and I know your new film was. Have you had a few films?
Yeah, we've actually had 5
Okay.
at South by.
So you must have a lot of experience then in actually what happens once you get over that hurdle and you get that acceptance, and then what do you do when you are one of 100 films at South by or however many films at Glasgow and you're trying to actually get it seen?
What do you mean? Like, just try, like, what do you do?
What do you do when you get off the plane?
When you get off the plane? Well, I think, I mean, if you can just take a step back, I think it's also important. I mean, if you do have, it's good to know the landscape of the different festivals and what film might be a better fit at, you know, said festival. So, I mean, you know, we get a publicist and we try to build momentum going in. You know, we you know, try to line up some journalists to write about the film, and you try to have some, at least, you know, 1 or 2 articles that are through friendly sources that just sort of get like a positive buzz starting with the film. And then, you know, you just sort of work your contacts when you're there. You try to get people to come out to it, and, you know, I guess I've been doing this long enough that I know a lot of the people already. So.
And what about the first time when you knew fewer?
I didn't know anyone. I think, well, okay, so what we did with Dark On was we had this idea. We didn't ask anyone's permission, but we staged like a mock battle. We brought the cast down and we staged a mock battle with like a role-playing scene they were all in armor where people did check-in, and everyone loved it. So like when people were checking in for their badges and stuff, we had these 2 parties were fighting, and then the drow and blackface like snuck behind both parties and like assassinated everyone. It was this like big role-playing thing that was hilarious. And then we brought down like 20 swords and we gave them away to people at like certain parties. Usually like we gave them away to like, you know, commissioning editors at networks. And it's still in the Magnolia office today. Like we didn't, I mean, they didn't acquire the film, but it's still there. I know people that work there and it's still there. They break it out like at their Halloween party or something.
Have they given you any work subsequently?
No. But the film was received well, and it actually got a remake with Paramount. The movie didn't get made, but it was in a remake with Paramount for about 8 or 9 years with Plan B. So I mean, that opened up a lot of relationships for us too. I mean, it ended up, you know, leading to us getting representation, getting other films made, and it just, you know, got the ball rolling. But that was you know, sort of like that grassroots marketing idea, you know, got us a lot of attention.
And Pegah, obviously, live action role play is harder to do in a digital sphere. But likewise, once you get the dream commission from Vice or whoever else and it's out there, what then? Do you think people need to be proactive about getting it seen, or will Vice do all that for them? Or
no, I think
not just Vice, incidentally, there's plenty of alternatives.
It's different. It's really different for every person who commissions you, for every film festival you get into, or, you know, for every filmmaker as well. I think, you know, it's like going back to what you were saying as well, Jake's often feeling like that, you know, it is harder to get into certain places, and that, you know, that often is the case as well, and it can feel quite sort of disheartening. And I think the sort of one of the important things to remember is that you know, it will be exhausting, but don't let that sort of like, you know, break your confidence, or, you know, think that it's not for you, whatever that is. I think it's just important to understand what it is that you want to make, like having a sort of understanding of your language, of your style, and, you know, when you're making documentaries or filmmaking, it's like, what is it that you're doing that is special to you? Is it the way that you're, I know I've said this before as well, but I think that is something that, for us, both from, you know, my background at Vice and also from Channel 4 as well, is, you know, looking at sort of who is doing something, you know, that people that put a stamp on a method of filmmaking or documentary making, for me, always stands out more. And it might be that, you know, the Vice put on one of your films, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's, you know, that's it now. It just means that you've still got a long way to go to, you know, going wherever, to getting your film at the film festivals and all of that stuff. But I think it's sort of knowing sort of who the right people are to go to. That's the sort of tricky bit, you know, because often you might feel like you're stabbing in the dark a bit and you're just approaching, cold calling everyone, but I think that can be quite exhausting. But if you actually sort of focus a little bit more and go, this is the kind of storytelling that I want to do. And what's difficult as a commissioner is you know, at Vice I used to get amazing stories, but they just weren't right for the Strand. It didn't mean that it was a bad story, it was a bad film, it just wasn't suitable for us. Same with Random Acts. I get like really amazing, you know, treatments come in, but you know they might not be in keeping with the Strand. And also it's really important for me to get quite a sort of healthy mix of all the different genres and styles and tones for what I'm doing. So often I have to turn down things that I actually really like. So don't let that sort of think that like, oh, they said no, it means it's crap, because that's often not the case.
If I can jump in for 1 second, I think what was important for me when I was first starting out is I was able to find someone that was okay with being my mentor, that was just really helpful. Because when you do send those cold email solicitations, people do get them, they just choose not to respond to them. So if you're just, and I mean that like sincerely, so if you know, if you're going to email someone like Pegah, it's just, you should understand what it is that she's producing, this Strand that she's producing, and the kind of stuff she's looking for. Because otherwise she might associate you with someone that just, you know, sends your horror script to Pegah. I mean, sometimes I get those. I mean, I produce one narrative and I'm not really in that world, but you know, sometimes I get projects that are nowhere near the kind of things that I do, and it just doesn't really make sense. Like if you're going to contact someone, you should take the time to try to figure out what it is they do.
Look at what they do as well.
And I think having a self-awareness of your content and what you've got. And
exactly.
Like, you might think this is the most unbelievable story in the world, but you might be better off just shooting this as a 10-minute piece on your iPhone, because there's not a place for it necessarily. Yeah. And like, you know, that's not to discourage people who just want to make content that they so love, regardless of where it's going to go. But this is about getting a foot into an industry rather than just making material.
I had someone that early in my career helped me understand kind of, you know, the way that all these different strands work. It's kind of overwhelming knowing that like each festival is different, and each, you know, at different networks there's different people that do different things, and it's you can't really, I guess you can sort of read a little bit about that online, but it's all kind of like insider information. Someone's got to tell you.
Yeah.
Do you think that stuff gets increasingly easy with each project?
It does.
Right.
It does. I mean, I know. I mean, at this point, I know most of the people at networks that I would want to acquire my film. Not necessarily meaning that they will, but I know them by face and they know me. And if I sent them an email, they would probably respond to me. So at this point, I mean, I know them well enough. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to buy my movie, but
I think there is a solution a little bit earlier. Like I'm, you know, obviously many steps behind you. Yeah. And I think that if you don't have access to that network, you do have access to the content. So you are able to see. You might not know the people kind of who are pulling the strings behind these labels, these networks, and these channels, and whether they're digital or theatrical or whatever. But you are able to look and see what stuff they're putting out, and if that matches or doesn't match the kind of thing that you want to make,
right.
And that can give you some indication.
Also, if you know them socially and you show them that like you're not desperate, that you're not going to be incredibly offended if someone doesn't pick up your film, it actually makes it a lot easier to stay in touch with someone.
And also to go back to something Jake was saying as well, you know, the sort of self-awareness of your, you know, whatever it is you're making. And I guess most people in here are, I'm assuming, want to sort of go into documentary, but the most sort of valuable thing that I learned at my time at Vice in particular was, and this is going to seem like a really obvious thing to say, but actually being engaged with the world. Because often when you're a filmmaker, I've seen it's happened to myself, it's happened to people around me, and even if you're an artist, you get kind of tunnel vision and you go so deep into this project that you're doing and you think it's everything. and you need to sort of sometimes take a step back and look at everything around you and like just get some perspective. And I think that helps a lot, and just sort of understanding culturally what's going on everywhere, and that can affect how you tell a story or what kind of stories you want to tell as well.
And I should say, when we're talking about communicating with people socially and knowing people, I don't think that means that you need to come from a world where you already have all the right connections or you've amassed a network, but just being kind of switched onto it. In fact, maybe Allison, you could tell us a bit about if a director's attending the festival with a film, maybe for the first time, what kind of advice do you give them to make the most of that?
We expect quite a lot from our filmmaker guests because we're an audience-based film festival, and so up close and personal is our ethos. So we don't, for example, we were talking about this earlier, at our opening gala, we don't have delegates. Everybody who buys a ticket gets to come to the party and get the free drink, and they love that. So we have a very open, egalitarian festival, we think, and we try to stick to that. So we expect our guest makers to introduce their film, do a Q&A afterwards, stay around, talk to the audience members. We have a festival club that all the audience members who've purchased a ticket can also have access to, so to talk to them as well. So, and we also say have filmmaker dinners, so talk to the other filmmakers, introduce yourself. We have a small industry in Scotland in terms of filmmaking, but most of them will be there at Glasgow Film Festival at some point. So introduce yourselves to the funders, the people who've got the money, and we make those personal connections because you never know what sort of co-production can come out of doing that at a festival. So
that's kind of a perfect example, in fact, of you wouldn't even need to have a film in the festival, just a
ticket.
£10 ticket, and you could make...
Well, not even as expensive as £10.
No, sorry, London.
Very cheap, yes. Not London.
How much is a ticket?
£8.50.
£8. So for £8 you can meet...
And £6.50 for concession.
£6.50.
Bargain.
And you can go in the club and meet all the Scottish filmmakers.
Yeah. We just have it's just a big bar, essentially, and everybody has access to it, so you just introduce yourself. So, and obviously all the staff at the festival, I want to come back to a little bit about interns, by the way. All the staff have badges, so we encourage our staff and our volunteers to introduce the filmmakers to other people. So it's just like a giant party, actually.
And I think so much of the networking thing as well is not necessarily about meeting Steven Spielberg and getting the money to make your film, but just meeting other people in your situation, and whether that's going to something like that or joining one of those kind of shooting people style community groups. I think that can be as productive as meeting your kind of mentor or whoever else.
Yeah. I mean, obviously this will change if George Clooney comes to the festival. I'm just saying, I'll have a personal room for him, But for example, Joss Whedon came to Glasgow Film Festival and he brought, as it was a closing gala, and he brought Much Ado About Nothing. But he came to the closing party that everybody came to. There was 600 people in a venue, and he was wandering around talking to everybody, signing hundreds of Buffy DVDs. But he was a really cool guy. He really appreciated that people liked his film. He was quite nervous about his film because this is the first time, not the first time, but it was a paying audience, and that was quite a unique thing for him. And I think filmmakers like audience-based film festivals where people have paid their money to see your film. That's what you want. I find industry festivals interesting, but there's a lot of chatter goes on. People are putting down their money and taking a chance on your film, and that's what I find. That's what I love about my film festival. People are taking a chance on very different, interesting films, and they're paying their money.
Do you ever get any knockback from the filmmaker? Because that is quite an unusual way to run it. Do people ever say, like, no, I can't talk to the public?
I won't say who they were, but we had two directors who worked on the same film, and they had come from Berlin, and they said, oh no, we only do introductions. And then they quite cheekily said in front of the hospitality bag, Glasgow Film Festival goodie bag, not up to Berlin standards. We've got a Hugo Boss suit. And the urge to throw them out their hotel room was overwhelming, however.
That feels quite easy to guess. A pair of directors from Berlin.
No, they weren't from Berlin. They'd just come from Berlin Film Festival.
Oh, okay.
So there you go. So that was, So we don't encourage our guests to be ill-mannered. So
Yeah, being nice is a very important thing as a filmmaker. Again, like not having an ego as well, because that can completely kill your creativity and deter people from wanting to work from you, because it means that there's no integrity in what you're doing, and it's sort of feels like a vanity project. I know that's a weird thing to say, but I've come across so many filmmakers who are doing it for the wrong reasons, and it's really off-putting. So I think having a sort of heart and a soul and really wanting to make something that's like means something has been the key across every single thing I've ever done.
I think one of the things that kind of unifies everyone on the panel, in fact, is having a few different fingers in different pies and so on. Like, as you were saying, you've produced various things, but you're now also working in a kind of commissioning role. Jake, you produce and direct and are launching at the end of the year your own like online platform for films, is that correct?
Offline.
Offline, oh okay, sorry. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Ish. I can tell you a little.
Okay.
We're looking to grow a network of small community-based screens that currently supports short filmmakers. In a sense, it's a democratized festival that has 0 submission fees, and we're looking to kind of build that throughout the US over the next year, and eventually use that to also take feature projects as well. I mean, I just don't think that there's space in the current distribution setup for the number of films being made, and me and my partners believe that there needs to be community, smaller spaced rooms, whether it's in bars or non-conventional exhibition spaces to show those films. So submit.
And is that, could you see yourself, because I think it's interesting that, especially at a documentary festival, it feels like almost every filmmaker here with a film has some other sideline, whether that's just to keep them financially stable, or, as I would imagine with something like that, to kind of inform your filmmaking and think about the bigger picture of the whole release. Yeah. If you were tomorrow directing Star Wars 8 or whatever, would you want to be keeping that going, or is it just a financial thing, or?
No, it's not just a financial thing at all.
Not even, in fact, it doesn't exist yet.
It doesn't exist yet, exactly. I mean, it's. I don't think that I have the willpower to let's say be an investment banker by day and a filmmaker by night. But I do think that economically, the nature of how film works, 2 to 3, it's a feature anyway, 2 to 3 years of spend for 1 to 15 years of recoupment, maybe, requires some kind of supplementary career. And that's why I started the PR and branding company, which is, retainer-based and provides me with salary, but also very conveniently puts my film out there. And so it's about, I think, finding careers that you can utilise your skills in, also that serve your passion and your pocket.
Because there was that film here last year, 112 Weddings, where the director had been a wedding videographer for 10 years, and the feature that he had now toured around festivals was built from all those wedding videos. So it's kind of perfect example of,
it's brilliant. It
would seem like a cash-in, but it could pay off down the line. I don't know if any of your PR work is similar.
How do you mean?
Could you ultimately edit it into a feature film?
No. My PR work's not video-based.
Oh, okay.
Most of it is more traditional.
Were you going to add something to that, Pegah?
Well, I mean, I guess it's the same with a lot of directors who, want to go into features, but it takes so long to get to that point. So that what they have to do in the meantime is direct commercials, and a lot of the time they don't like doing it because they feel like they're selling their soul, and it's against everything they're about. But essentially, that's often we have to kind of. And it's the same even as a company. Like Vice essentially did branded content in order to fund the documentaries that they wanted to make, that no one was going to pay them to make. They couldn't go to sort of big companies at the time and say, hey, we want to do a documentary about a heavy metal band in Iraq. Can we have some money to do it? It was hard, so they went, okay, well, let's just do a little, the sort of more money-making bit on the side, and that will fund the things that we want to do and we don't have to answer anyone for. And I think that applies to you as an independent filmmaker as well. And you might feel like, you know, I think that it's totally okay to do that, doing some of the jobs that you know, the more commercial jobs, or even not even in terms of filmmaking, but having a sort of part-time job in order to sort of fund your passion projects as well. I think that
was something I was going to bring up about interns. Presumably, we have a policy at Glasgow Film that we do not employ any unpaid interns. We also pay the Glasgow living wage to everybody who works for us, which is above the national living wage as a policy. We are a not-for-profit making educational charity, so we're in a very unique and privileged position, and therefore we have to give back. But we took the unpaid intern thing out of anything we do at the festival because for me, coming from a sort of social background, I just believed that we would only get one type of person working for us if we had unpaid interns, i.e. people who have rich parents, because nobody else in my world can work 3 months without getting paid. And so we took that out of the equation. We work with universities and we work with colleges that people come as part of their course to work with us, but we do not do unpaid internships, because for me, and this is a personal feeling, but it's reflected in where I work, is it's not a good way forward for filmmakers, because you have to earn money, you have to pay rent presumably, and you have to buy food. So I'm laying my cards on the table there.
As for what Tom was saying, what kind of duties would you be expecting that person to do? What could a member of the audience look forward to doing if they got on your intern scheme?
We only paid positions. Every job.
Oh, I think you meant you did paid internships.
No, we don't do internships at all.
Okay.
It's all paid positions. So rather than getting people to intern to do things that essentially paid people should be doing, they should be paid to do.
So
not everyone is as nice as you, though. There's a lot of
No, I do understand that, but somebody's got to start that ball rolling. Yeah. And I think it's important, especially, I don't know about the audience out here, you know, you do need to earn money, presumably. You know, you can't, hands up people who can just work for nothing. Right.
I mean,
there you go, welcome.
I have to say that, I mean, a lot of the filmmakers that I know that have gone on to be successful come from money. And the reason that they've been able to stick with it is because when you're a filmmaker, it really does take, you know, a decade or longer, 15 years, to really get some traction in the industry and make a couple of films and keep going. And like, we had one intern who had this great idea that he was going to make a movie about internships, and it was going to be a short film, and then maybe he was going to make it longer. And of course, he never finished it, and we helped him shoot it for years. But like, there are 2 companies that we're working with right now, and it was interesting that the 2 people that are running these very successful companies both started out as interns working for different people. Like Josh Stern, who runs Darren Aronofsky's company, used to be Ted Hope's intern, and then David Hinojosa, who works at Killer Films, was someone else's intern. And it was just really interesting. I mean, there's definitely a value to internships, but you should try to figure out what it is that you want to do in the industry, and then go, you know, try to do an internship for one of those companies. And both of those 2 companies I mentioned are pretty small companies. So, you know, there's some value there that you are going to be interacting with people that are the principals of the company.
With the Glasgow Film Festival, when you have new people coming in the paid positions, that is there a certain level of experience that's required? Where, like, because I think it's brilliant that you've got rid of the unpaid internships, but what would you now see as a kind of starting point for people?
Well, we also work with the young people that you came to see when you were... we have a youth film festival, which essentially is 15 to 18-year-olds, mostly people who are at school, and quite a lot of them from what we call in Glasgow socio-economic deprived areas, and we actively recruit them to come to work with us in the Youth Film Festival programme, and we mentor them. They come after school every Tuesday night from 5 to 7, and they work with us for a year, and they put on their own film festival. And Charlie came along and showed his film to all those young people who were very inspired and loved your chat. And then a lot of them then progress into these paid positions. So really what we're looking to do is give people the experience through the youth and the pop-up programmers programme that we do, and then they come to us, and if they've been working with the Youth Film Festival or the pop-up programmers, we obviously give them priority for these paid positions because they've already been working with us for a little while in terms of those during their school time. So little experience, we sort of graduate people, so some people will start print transport, for example, with no experience, just, you know, because somebody will oversee them, and so they learn, and then the person who did the print transport then became the programme coordinator the next year, and then they move on. So essentially it's a way to help those people who want to get their foot in the industry. We also work with the University of Edinburgh. Rebecca, who's in this room, who is looking after this room, is a paid position this year at Sheffield, and we asked them to curate a day of film in the actual main film festival, and so they curate a whole day for us, all the students, and then we sell the tickets, and then they do their own thing, and it's a really great event. So that Rebecca's over in the corner there, she did it last year. She had a great day. It was all about women. It was fantastic. So that's the university students who are on a course. They curated a whole day, and we gave them the platform during the main film festival. So I think it's all about giving the right opportunities and making sure that that you're responsible as a film festival, because I came the hard way up. I started as an usher because I got Mrs. Thatcher got rid of all the teachers, so I couldn't have a teaching job anymore. So I started as an usher, and I worked my way up, just doing everything.
Yeah, incidentally, when we were talking about getting jobs in the film industry that aren't necessarily exactly what you want to be doing, the biggest one seems to be working in a cinema. Almost every filmmaker I know at some point worked in a branch of Cineworld. Yeah. And do you find that with the people coming into the Glasgow Film Festival, that a lot of them want to work in film?
Yeah, a lot of them want to work in film, and they like it because obviously they get to watch films as well. And as you know, you can't make great films if you don't watch great films. You know, which is a shame for all those those filmmakers working at Cineworld. But never mind.
Isn't that one of your venues?
Yes, we do use Cineworld. Yes. Yes, we love them. It's. A lot of them want to be. A lot of them are Glasgow School of Art students who work with us, and they are on that sort of experimental film and video art section. And we have a whole section in the film festival, Crossing the Line, which is about art and experimental filmmaking, and we tie in with Glasgow School of Art, etc. Because Glasgow is just awash with Turner Prize winners, apparently. So everywhere you go, there's a Turner Prize winner on our doorstep. The last 3, I think, have come from Glasgow.
All right, now you're just showing off.
Yeah, no, well, obviously I haven't won the Turner Prize.
I think on that note, we'll open it out to questions if anyone has any questions for our filmmakers or our festival runners.
Hi, I'm here with all the BFI Academy students. So we actually have quite a lot of students here, about 40 or 16 to 19, who have done various film courses. Do I need to press it, or is it that's great? Sorry. I was just saying we're here with about 40 students, so it's been really interesting. Thank you to the panel. Really, I think it's been really good for them. Fantastic to hear what you're saying about paid roles, because I was getting quite apoplectic listening to internships, because I know most of the students we work with, again, are not in a position to just go and work for somebody for 3 months and not get any money, so it's quite important. Pegah, can I ask you specifically about Random Acts, and do you take submissions from people who are in full-time education if they're at university, or is that something, because I know, say, there's various organisations in the UK don't.
So part of, so Random Acts is a sort of partnership between Arts Council England and Channel 4, and what sort of the way the setup before was that, we both put in equal amounts of budget, and Channel 4 commissioned all of the films that went on TV, sort of one short a night went on TV every single night, Monday to Friday, for like 3 or 4 years. Now the dynamic has slightly changed, and the Channel 4 still continued to commission those, but the partnership with Arts Council has meant that the Arts Council is now setting up 5 different network centres around the country. So one in each region, and basically all of those network centres, they're, everything from institutions to theatres to cinemas. I think maybe even BFI might slightly be involved in some way, or maybe not, I can't remember. But Right. Okay. Yeah. And so they are kind of set up specifically to discover young talent, 16 to 24-year-old filmmakers. And from what I understand, it doesn't matter if they're in full-time education. And they take submissions. Again, it's sort of, they're doing like a call to action, taking submissions, and then once they pick a certain amount of filmmakers, they'll help them to train them and mentor them, if you like, to make the films, and then those get sent to us. So that's probably a really good way to kind of get into seeing what they're doing, because it's not just about them picking the filmmakers, but they'll also be doing a series of workshops and talks and screenings and that sort of thing, and you should definitely kind of look out for that. The information should be all on the Channel 4 website or Arts Council website quite soon, or you can come and ask me later.
Yeah? Hang on.
Thanks. A lot of the time you're hearing people say that if you want to start out, you can do it on an iPhone. Is that really what you mean? And if you can, and if you really want to start exploring your own capacity to start making films, what is the basic kit list you would suggest?
Tom, you might pick up.
So I produced a movie that was mostly shot on an iPhone. It's called King Kelly. It's a narrative. No, I wouldn't go out and shoot a movie. That was intentional because it was about a girl that's like a webcam star, and it was sort of part of the whole thing. But you have to know. Are you speaking as a director?
My hobby is not. That's my hobby. Radio documentaries. I'm now, I've been around film and documentaries in every capacity other than making them myself.
So it sounds like you need a partner. So like the way that me and my three partners, I think like the way that we were able to keep going. We've made 8 films between the four of us. We've done 6, and then we helped produce 2 friends' films. But we committed to renting a commercial space, which was a burden for everyone. And then by doing all that, everyone is expected to go into the office. We still all freelance. As a company, we really don't do commercial work because we feel like it's a distraction from making features, and it is, to pursue that work. But we all do that as in a freelance capacity, and then we sort of come home. But when we're in the office together, we're trying to make our features. So, and we all have complementary skills. Like, I'm not a director. I don't know how to I don't shoot with a camera. I also don't edit, but I think I have other skills that I contribute to what everyone else is doing. So maybe you could find a partner that you could sort of collaborate with that maybe is a camera person, and you could, between the two of you, if you sort of write the story, you write the documentary story, you bring that to the table, and then they bring some physical, technical skills, and then you keep each other motivated, and you make a plan together. Like that's like us sort of forming that partnership. And even if we didn't have money, or that person you thought that was going to work for a reduced rate, if they bail on you, between the 4 of us, we always had some way of seeing a project through.
I think at the beginning, maybe before you're clear on exactly what role best suits you within a collaborative approach to making a documentary.
Mm-hmm.
From where I am, I have shot. So basically, I'm a journalist. So daily reports and the like, fine. Done radio documentaries, fine. I want to just see what happens if I try and make my own longer format stories that are not based on reviews. I will start that by trying taking the film, the camera experience I had from way back before I started, because I present now. I want to take that back, try and make the film, and see whether that's something I want to remaster, or whether it's better for me to step back and concentrate more on what I can contribute on in terms of writing and coming up with ideas and committing to a collaborative process. But I know myself, and before I get to that point, I need to try something. I would make a short film. I would make a short film, and with a partner that could
shoot and maybe edit, and you can do that together and sort of learn every step of the process.
And maybe a partner or someone who collaborative.
I mean that's, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to buy a camera, you know, and then get
Or you
some
find
sound
someone
equipment.
who's got one.
That's very loud.
Also, you might want to, sorry,
Go ahead.
just quickly, it might be that if you can't find a partner but you have a really amazing story, that's another thing that you can pitch. A lot of the time we used to get pitched amazing documentary ideas by journalists who weren't story makers. One of the first docs I did before, you know, just as I was sort of starting out at Vice, was a journalist who came to me and wanted to do a story in India. And at the time I couldn't do it through Vice because Vice had no money. It was very sort of new. The production department was very much a baby, so they didn't fund it. But then I recognised that it was a really interesting story, and I, as a producer, filmmaker, wanted to shoot it. So I saved up a bit of money and went with my friend and did it. So you can pitch the story as much as you can, the actual feeling the need that you need to go and like learn all the production bits, because you can find people that will want to do that based on how good your story is as well. Does that make sense?
I was going to also add, you know, asking in the abstract's difficult. Working out exactly where you want to go and shoot, you might need a camera for 6 hours, right? So you might be able to either collaborate with someone who's willing to shoot with you for half a day, or rent one for a considerably less amount of money than buying one. Or even, like, I know that in the US now there are like several startups that are pushing kind of like the Airbnb of film equipment. It's like, oh, you've got this lens and I've got this, okay, let's barter, which is not in the UK yet, but like there are trends that are making equipment more accessible for filmmakers or people like myself who are looking to make but don't necessarily have the access to the equipment. So it's just to be aware of.
Yeah, and in fact, I mentioned it briefly earlier, but you should look into shooting people if you're not already a member of that group, because that every day they send out bulletins basically just saying, can someone help me out with this? Does anyone want to collaborate? So if you are at a stage where you just want to kind of try it out rather than commit to a 3-month shoot or whatever, that could be a really kind of easy way in. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if we have any time for more questions, but everyone will be sticking around if you want to ask them anything personally. Before we go, are there any kind of like, we've had quite a wide-ranging discussion. Does anyone have any kind of single points that they think people should take away? Of how to force the foot through the door
really
and stop the door closing on the foot?
I think maybe just trust your instinct. That's, again, it's a very cliche thing to say, but you know, sort of following your gut a little bit and doing something that feels right for you is probably an important thing. And also, you know what story you want to tell, and you know how you want to make a film, and sort of stick to that rather than being too sort of all consumed with what other people are going to want to watch. I think that, you know, if you're doing it from the heart, then often that's when you get the best results. When you try and do something that doesn't feel quite right to you, then the process will just be really difficult, and it won't sort of work out, I think. I don't know.
No,
Don't listen
you do
to
know.
me.
That
That's
was good.
probably the best advice that I could give.
So I guess my takeaway tip is something that I've said before. I think it's important, if you want to go out and be a filmmaker, I think it's important to find someone to partner with, because it can be really hard to sort of stay motivated and follow something through and make a career out of it and still be doing it 10 years later. It actually, you know, by yourself, it can be really hard to continue on that path. And so, you know, myself and one of the directors that's in my company that's here, we have, you know, different personalities. You know, like I like to go out and hobnob and meet people and do that kind of thing, and that's sort of the last thing he wants to do. He does not like doing that kind of thing at all. He really doesn't really like playing the game in that way and schmoozing at all. But he's also brilliant. He just has he's very good one-on-one with people. He's also, you know, he's good in the pitch, but he's not really like, you know. So, but we have different skill sets that we bring to the table, and we complement each other well. You know, he's also, in addition to being a director, he's also a very good editor. So when we do, and him and I are now getting into producing together, and he's been, you know, editing the promos for the directors that we've been working with, so that we can go out and pitch them. So that's very helpful. Like, I'm the one that goes out and makes the connections, and he's the one that
creatively produces the projects and also edits them. So.
That's probably quite useful for, you know, your group. If, you know, as a student, you're sort of surrounded by your peers all the time and you understand how each other work, and so it's probably easier to spot like people that you think you can have a good sort of working relationship with too.
Yeah, and of course we were talking about trying to find spaces where you could meet those people, but actually there's 100 of you in here, you could just turn around and look at each other. Jake, any thoughts? On the day of the world premiere of your first film, I realise it's a little bit thinking ahead.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm going to cheat and kind of take a regressive step and put what Tom and Pegah said into perspective maybe, and say that it's a balance of that idealism that you can be the best storyteller and you've got amazing ideas and you're going to find and feel and follow your instincts and communicate things that matter to you, matched with the cynicism that this is a really oversaturated industry with really scarce resources and you need to be very practical and collaborative about how you do that. I guess that would be my final tip is having that idealism and that cynicism/realism in check.
I'd say from the exhibitor's point of view, go and watch lots of great movies. Obviously, come to Glasgow Film Festival. Really, that's the best film festival in the world. Sorry, Sheffield. To say that. And just enjoy watching movies. You know, that's if you love movies, then go and watch lots. You can't make great movies if you don't see great movies. So Martin Scorsese said that, not me. So.
And if people have their films like with them, can they just slip them into your bag?
Yes, I will give them due diligence on the train home.
Well, thank you to all the panelists and to all of you for coming.